Hi weaving friends, I'm working away on this sampler, and while I'm working I'm actually thinking of all of you. I'm thinking of some of the questions that I've been asked about how I come up with designs, where you would begin to kind of start with something like this, because I've got my own mental processes for making new projects, designing projects, but it's not something that I can easily explain or show because it's just something that I do. So I thought while I'm working on this is a perfect time for me to just chat a little bit about my process that might just help you, give you some ideas, trigger some thoughts that might not have occurred to you, and ways that you could go about doing things as well. Basically, I'm just going to chat a little bit about what I'm doing here, and you might pick some things up. This video is brought to you by the Online Weaving School with over 8,000 registered users and over 70 classes to pick from. There really is something for everyone. I'll leave a link to the school down below so that you can go and check it out. So friends, what I'm doing right here is a sampler for my up and coming class, which is going to be Monk's Belt on the table loom. I actually only have one table loom class currently, and so I have been asked a lot of times to make some more table loom classes, and this loom just happens to be a really good width for the project that I want to do. So the finished project that we're going to do for the class is going to be, it's going to combine some of these elements, but it's not going to be exactly the same as this piece. But this is an essential part of my designing process. I'm also going to just continue weaving a little bit while I speak to you so that you can see me doing that as well. How I started with this sampler is, and I just as an aside, I like to do my samplers around 7 to 8 inches in width and around 70 inches long, but the width does depend on the weaving draft that I've drawn up. The main decider for the actual width of the sampler is how many design repeats I'm going to get if I use a particular width. So what I mean by that, if that sounds like mumbo jumbo, does a little bit to me sometimes too, but basically if you have a look at these rose designs, these were really important for this design. This is one thing that I really wanted to be a big feature of this design. And what I'm actually designing for this sampler is for a skinny runner, which is basically just something I made up that instead of like a full width table runner, I've got a bookshelf, and the bookshelf is fairly narrow on top. And I've always thought I'd be lovely to have something hand woven sitting on top of that. And so it's basically a runner, but a much reduced in width. Okay, so back to what I was saying. The rose design here was what I wanted to stand out and be a feature. And so you can see here with my sampler size of around 7 inches, allow me to just check that, just in case I'm telling fibs. It's almost exactly 7 inches. So within that 7 inches, I could get 3 threading repeats of the main rose design. And when you're doing a sampler, you want to have, I think that 2 repeats of the threading design, it's not really enough to get a real feel for how your design is going to actually look. So I always aim for at least 3 repeats. Sometimes I do 4 repeats. Just depends on the design, but I thought because this is such a bold design, I could get away with 3 repeats, and that has worked fine. So I did the 3 threading repeats, and I also did a different threading repeat over this side. Funny story here, I was actually meant to do half of this threading at the beginning over this side, and then the other half over this side to balance it out. So there's meant to be half as much of this design on this side and half of it is meant to be on this side, and I forgot. So another great reason to always take the time to do a sampler, because now when I come to the actual design, I know that I'm not going to forget to incorporate that extra bit over this side, or at least I hope that I won't. It seems quite unlikely that I would, because it's a bit of a pain that I did forget it. But anyway, it turned out okay because I get to see what the design looks like anyhow. It starts with the warp width and length, and then of course I have to decide on the set and the yarns. And I have actually woven a bit of monk's belt before, so I already had the set and the yarns in mind for what I was going to do. Then I needed to decide on kind of thicknesses of yarns and that sort of thing. And this is where designing on the loom comes in a lot. So I can have my weaving draft all planned out, and I do that in Weave It Pro. You don't, some people are going to ask me this, I know, about Weave It Pro and about Fiberworks and all of those drafting programs. They are fantastic, but you need to know weaving drafts first, basically. Some people are under the impression that the program somehow puts the draft together for you, but that's not really correct. You need to actually know what you're doing with the draft first. So just consider that if you're thinking about getting some weaving software, that you want to learn more about drafts first, so that once you get the program, you can actually use it effectively. So I have my draft drawn out on Weave It Pro, and I have my laptop next to me so that I can follow the treadling along where I need to. And then once I start actually weaving the draft, it's all a bit of an experiment. If I haven't done a particular design or a particular treadling pattern before, or used particular yarns, then yeah, it's all a bit of an experiment to see what's actually going to work and what isn't. An example of that is I'm weaving at 20 ends per inch, but in the weft I needed to decide, am I going to make that apply to my tabby as well, because Monk's Belt has tabby in between every pattern pick. So in between every black pick that I'm doing here, I'm doing a white, and the white is my tabby. So I needed to decide, am I going to double my tabby weft as well? Because it's an 8/2 cotton. I doubled the weft, I doubled the warp to get the 20 ends per inch. Am I going to double the weft as well? And I thought, well, I'm not really sure, but for a start, I'm going to weave it as a single, because I want this pattern weft to really be the standout feature here. So that was the first experiment, and I started doing that, and I found that yes, indeed, I did prefer the single tabby weft. I didn't want the tabby to be a huge feature. I really like the tabby in Monk's Belt to look very nice and fine interlacement, just in the background though, just to be a nice fine feature. And then for the pattern weft to really take center stage. So I had my tabby sorted out, and then I needed to decide what I was going to do for my pattern weft. And this is something that I don't plan ahead too much. I've got a vague idea of, you know, what I might start out using and what might work. But it doesn't always work, and sometimes it requires adjustments. So I had the idea that I might try Bambu for the pattern weft. Let me grab my other sampler. This is another Monk's Belt sampler that I did, oh wow, years ago now. And I've actually got a blog post, and I've got a members only class. It's more like a kind of workshop companion video for this sampler, but I'm going to link to the blog post down below, so that if you're not a member, you can at least have a look at the blog post if you're interested. But here for this green, and also for this blue and green, I used Bambu 7. So a lot of people don't know what that is, but it is available here in Australia if you want it. It's from BB Yarn in Queensland. Also, you can buy it in the US, and I'm going to link the supplier down below. It's a little bit harder to get, but it is a gorgeous fiber. I've made scarves with it. It's fabulous for scarves. It's so soft and sheeny and just lovely. Anyway, so I knew that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily be able to get Bambu 7 to people who were doing the class. And so I thought I've got to use something that is more readily available. I still wanted to use Bambu because Bambu is so gorgeous for monk's belt. I'll just give you a squeeze at the rest of this sampler. That one has a silk weft, so lovely. Yeah, and a lot of this is Bambu actually. So yeah, that's a sampler from years ago, and that's how long it's taken me to get around to making this class. So anyway, I wanted to use the Bambu, but a more readily available Bambu. So I've got an 8/2 Bambu here. I knew that an 8/2 single Bambu for the pattern weft just was not going to cut it because it's just way too thin. And so I thought, okay, I'll double it to start with and see how that looks. So I doubled it. And it was okay, but there were gaps in between these pattern picks, too many gaps. And I really like my monk's belt to look very solid. It does look a little bit gappy on the loom here, but that's going to improve once I wet finish it. I know that from experience. But the two, doubling the weft was just not quite there, not quite what I wanted. And so I decided that I would triple the weft. So that's kind of unusual because I don't usually triple a weft at any time really. Usually doubling it is enough, or I will just use a thicker yarn. But as I said, I wanted people who do the class to be able to access the yarns that I list. And so I tried it triple and it was just the ticket. It's perfect for what I wanted. And that's something that I couldn't have known before I began. So sampling is really important, really beneficial, because it will show you the things that you don't know. It's like you becoming your own teacher in order to show yourself what you don't know yet. And giving yourself this kind of space and time and liberty to just have a go. I had my treadling all mapped out before I started, but I've changed that as well because I realized once I started weaving that I could incorporate other things that in a different way to what I had already planned and written down that would be more pleasing to me. So that giving yourself permission to just have a go and have a try is fine. And hey, if you weave something that you think is completely ugly and horrible, well, at least you know that that's not what you want to weave the next time. Or, you know, you've got some warp left where you can change what you were doing and try something different that you might find more pleasing. The point is just to have a go and be prepared to change things around and not necessarily completely adhere to the original draft that you had. It's things like what I'm doing right now is going, I think I'd like a pop of yellow in between the pink there. And that wasn't part of my original plan, but I just thought that it might look nice, and I started doing that, and I really liked the way it set off the pink and the black. So I just started laying that in, and it looks great, and it's, you know, it's better than I could have planned for, really. So now that I've been doing this sampler, the original design that I had, both in my head and on paper, has really changed. Like the fundamentals are still there. As I said about these roses, that was one of the fundamentals that I wanted to incorporate. But I've given myself the flexibility to change it completely if I want to. in order to make it more pleasing to me. And you can do the same. So all I'm really doing here is I'm changing the treadling around a little bit, but I'm not changing the number, the treadling numbers. I'm just changing the amount of times that I treadle them. And that gives quite a different effect. One thing I really love about monk's belt, when you're designing it on the loom especially, is, you know, once you've got your threading done, there's just so many different combinations of treadling that you can try. And you realize that what you're really doing with monk's belt is you're building blocks, building shapes. And there are a few weave structures like that. You'll see that in overshot too, because monk's belt is like an overshot variation, even though it's different to monk's belt and different to overshot in a lot of ways. But it's just building shapes on the loom. And once you see how your threads are cooperating, you can build those shapes and you don't even have to think about it too much. Here's an example. I've got my bottom half of my roses here. Now I want to do the mirror image for the top half of the rose, because you can see down further, I've got the bottom half there, and then I've done the mirror image for the top half. So I just need to repeat these, but in reverse. So you can see that I'm repeating repeating these blocks here. And if I got it wrong, well, I could just open up the shed and I could take it back if it wasn't right. It's only a sampler, so it's no big deal. So I'll keep going. So having ideas is just a part of the process, but then you often need to actually do it in order to know how it's going to look, how it's going to work, and whether you're going to actually like it or not. There have been projects that I've done in my weaving life where I've planned it all out on paper, used weaving software, whatever. Had everything what I thought was going to be just absolutely beautiful and perfect, but not woven a sampler first. And sometimes it's turned out. Other times it's just been like, this is not what I expected at all. And whether it's because, you know, I hadn't thought of how a particular yarn was going to behave, or because I hadn't realized that those particular color combinations were going to look that particular way. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why projects don't turn out sometimes. But doing the sampler just safeguards you against any kind of disappointment, any unpleasant surprises. And then once you get to your actual project, you can just get on with it because you have that confidence now of knowing what's going to work for that particular design. So when we do this monk's belt class, it's going to start with a sampler. And I do a lot of my classes this way now. I start out with a sampler. I make the sampler just small and achievable, so it doesn't have to be a big deal, but it's really like an integral part of your learning process and exploring and discovering things for yourself as well. It's all very well to have someone else showing you things that they do, but you need to have that freedom to discover things for yourself as well, to find the things that you really like, things that resonate with you. I can show you all my different projects, but they're all from me. They're all from my imagination, my desires, my likes and dislikes. So I love it when my students branch out and try things for themselves and do things in completely different colors to what I would have imagined to do, because I get stuck in my own color ruts and that sort of thing as well. I find myself often using the same colors over and over just because I really like them, and probably because I'm a little bit afraid to try some different colors that I don't love so much, and you know, maybe not have my project turn out the way that I want to. So that it's important for me to be trying out all of these different colors and combinations as well. Okay, so that is my rose, my second row of roses. And then I'm just going to pop a little bit of plain weave in there. So because I'm going to do that, I'll cut this weft. And tuck my tail in. So the main reason that I made this video today is just because, as I said, I was thinking of all of you while I was weaving this, and even though it's really hard to share your creative process in a really coherent way, and I'm sorry if this video is kind of choppy and lacks clarity, but I hope that it's an encouraging thing to say, just have a go, just put on a warp on your loom, whether it's your rigid heddle loom, whether it's your table loom. You know, if it's a table loom, maybe just pick a draft and thread up that draft, and then just experiment with yarns, with your treadling, just do a bunch of different stuff and have fun and see what happens. So I'm really pleased with this. This is going to be great, this project. I think it's going to be really wonderful. Now, I'm not sure that in my finished project for the class, I'm going to end up using these colors. I do really like the colors, except the warp. Oh, I can't tell you about this warp. This is a light green. I think I bought it, I don't know what color it's called. Maybe it's called a lime green or something, but you know, limes to me are like a really dark, vibrant green. And this stuff, I bought cones and cones of it because someone was offering it cheap, this lime green, if that's what it was called. And honestly, I've had it for years, and I've used it mostly for sampling when I wasn't too concerned about what the warp color was, because I've pretty much just been trying to get rid of it ever since I bought it. I have used it in a project and I didn't like it at all. And so, yeah, I've just been trying to use it up. I have used it for this project, but I won't be using it for my runner when I actually get to that project. Definitely not. I've got a couple of yarn colors that are like that. Like I bought them, you know, maybe they look good on the screen or whatever. And then they show up and I'm like, oh, is that what I ordered? That's, that's not what I was after. But anyway, it's good to have some yarn that you're not worried about using up to sample with. So if you are interested in the sound of my table loom monk's belt class, you can look out for that. I'm still obviously in the sampling stages. I have the actual sampler for the class all ready to go, and I just need to actually film that. But I needed to absolutely get this runner right before I commence the class. So that's what this is all about. And doing this has taught me a lot. You know, it doesn't really matter how many samplers you do. I think you still learn from every single one of them. So thanks for joining me today. If you enjoy this informal chat style of video, be sure to let me know in the comments. Then I know whether it's worth me making more of them. I guess it's a little bit like a studio vlog, but much less organized. It's just kind of real life weaving and chatting. If you like it, let me know. And definitely look out for this table loom class. If you want to see my weaving on a table loom class, which is like a complete beginner startup class, it even includes putting the loom together, I'm going to link to that down below. Friends, thank you for watching. Thank you for all your love and support. And until next time, happy weaving.